We come to the first presentation of a series that will be 13. And the reason for using a 13-part scale is that it is a very ancient technique. One sophisticated way to talk about it is that it sets up a resonant set that, when it's completed, makes a harmonic. And because it's a harmonic, all of the resonances become participant in an architectonic. And when they settle into the mind as ideas, they achieve the quality of an architecture. But when they're in a visionary mode of being able to envision, they shift to an architectonic, and the architecture becomes capable then of a music. So that you have forms of symbols in thought that are interchangeable, exchangeable with processes of envisioning, and because they have centers that are exchangeable, they constitute then together a very interesting kind of a pivot. They're able to be both energy forms and they're able to be dynamic processes. The center of the energy form in the symbolic mind is the imagination. It takes the images from experience, both images that are visual and audio, olfactory, tactile, and brings them together in the imagination so that the mind can now imagine and does not have to just have a ritual existential referent to check it and to check it out and keep checking it, though it can do that. Nor does it have to monitor experience in a critical way all the time, but the mind can then form a symbolic structure in the imagination. What happens in visioning is that there is not just a process, but it is a dynamic field. And that dynamic field is what we today call consciousness. So that consciousness is a dynamic field, and it serves as a fifth dimension, as a quintessential dimension. And the centering of that visioning field is remembering, the dynamic of remembering. And because imagination and remembering are, in the words of current subatomic physics, they are entangled. That is, they came into reality together. They are able to exchange with each other no matter how advanced one or the other is, no matter where they are. And as they exchange in a very interesting way. Remembering, going into the symbolic structure of the mind, becomes the memory. So now the mind has a symmetrical, paired centering, the imagination and the memory. And they're able to work together, like the two eyes working together in a synergy, so that one can use the memory and imagination in a very profound way to seal, to tighten anything integrally and seal it so that it is sealed. It becomes a part of reality then, when the mind seals by the memory and the imagination working together. But in visioning consciousness, remembering receives the imagination as creative imagining. So now consciousness has the ability to have a symmetrical pair also, creative imagining and remembering. And when those are working together dynamically, a new kind of form is able to be emerged from that, and those are art forms. They are not existential forms. They are not symbol forms. They are art forms. And what distinguishes an art form is there's always an artist. And that artist now is prismatic rather than pragmatic, can participate pragmatically with their existential body, can participate pragmatically with their symbolic mind, but can function as a prismatic person, and the prismatic person is able to use the dynamic of remembering and creative imagining to transform those integral forms, can transform the body, can transform the symbolic mind. About 50,000 years ago, our species, Homo sapiens, went through a huge transform by art. Our particular species, Homo sapiens, had our origins by tracing DNA and paleoarchaeology back. We were mutant about 200,000 years ago. There was an Eve. The first Homo sapien was a woman. But after 150,000 years, our species underwent a refinement. And it's evident because for the first time, anywhere on the planet, you find paintings, you find sculptures. And those sculptures and those paintings are put into caves. They are under the earth. They're not on the surface of the earth where natural life takes its integral place, where existence has its foundation, where symbolic structures have their cognition. But they are placed under the earth in caves, and it's in caves that we begin to find that our species morphed in a refinement to Homo sapiens sapiens. What made us Homo sapiens is different from Homo neanderthal, or Homo erectus, or Homo habilis, was the ability for Homo sapiens to speak. That the spoken language needed a change in the physiology of the Homo clad, and so that Homo sapiens had a neurological transform, that the thoracic area of the spinal column became much more complex, many dozens of times, that the brain now had not just a larger capacity, but had a reformation of the way in which the neuronal nets of the brain worked. Homo neanderthal, on the average, had a larger brain than Homo sapiens, but they could not speak like we do. They had their own sound systems. They had their own, as it were, grunts and yelps and so forth, but they could not speak discursively like I am doing now. Nor could they tell myths. Nor could they convey the experience of the character that they, through their lives, found that they were, and share with each other the characteristics of their character and refine that so that they got a sense of individuality in their symbol, thought, structure. And the I am I is not just I am this body, but I am as I am. Homo sapiens not only transformed the spinal column in the thoracic region and the brain structure, the arrangement of it, but oral language was able to offer a new integral where speech was able to take the images and the feelings and the existential actions that we do, the existential things that we work with, and that world was literally arranged for the first time in a way that it was able to be cognized and language was able to speak to it. So that now Homo sapiens, having that capacity, were 50,000 years ago transformed so that there was an art now where the spoken language, which had integrated itself to the point to where one was able for the first time to have a mind that could remember in the memory, could imagine in the imagination, and could develop a quality that took a long time to mature, and that was to be able to make a written language. So that Homo sapiens, after about 45,000 years as Homo sapiens, learned how to read and write. And learned that it isn't just reading and writing by marks of phonetic designation or by pictographs of existential referentiality or symbolic indications. One of the earliest symbolic indications in cave art is the hand. And I brought a hand, which has been my symbol since 1975. The hand appears as the sealing of the deal, the sealing of that this array of art is made and finished and now is a prismatic presentation rather than a representation. It's a presentation of what is possible rather than a representation of what was there, so that there-ness as a referent becomes superseded by possibilities that are not there yet. And what occurs out of this increasingly is a sense of future time, that one can work towards bringing that future time into being by the transforming of our actions, by the transforming of the toning of our body, by the capacities of training our body, and the same for our mind. And the key to it is that experience must be able to not only be in the world and integrated into the mind as a symbolic structure, but that the person be able to reach through by remembering and creative imagining into the memory and the imagination and guide the character of our experience into being able to recognize their true person, their spiritual person. And in this way, there's an art of person making. And almost every mature Homo sapiens sapien is an artist for their, not only their lives, but for the person who is able to transform their character, to transform the character so that both their physical body and their symbolic mind are also available to be transformed. And what is of a deeper mystery is that the field of consciousness now, because it can recognize on a very deep, refined level, on a very high, expansive scale, recognizes that nature now is not in existence, but is the field out of which existence occurs, so that nature is a field as well. And that consciousness and nature as two fields work together. And for the first time, you have the recognition of a complementarity. And that complementarity does not just produce the world, does not just have the body as a source of referential certainty, or the symbolic mind as the structure of integral cognition, but even further, that the recognition of the presentational complementarity of the field of nature and the field of consciousness produce a larger complexity called the reality. Now the person has a triad, a trinity, a thrice greatest quality of living and participation. They can transform the world and their actions in it. They can transform their mind and their thought structures, their imagination, their memory, integraling it. They can also transform the transforming quality of the prismatic person that they now enjoy as a third kind of a form. And the work of the transforming of the art of the person engenders another dimension, another kind of quality that was not there before. It wasn't there in nature. It was nascent in conscious visioning. It now becomes actualized in the art of the person spiritually, and the actions that are done then are transformed. The thoughts that one has are transformed. The future imagining, the past remembering, working together, create a symmetry of a new past and a future, and they become together like creative, memorable parentheses that keep the expansion balanced. So that one of the qualities of deep insight that high wisdom has is that as we begin to understand that the future is achievable, the past becomes flexible as well and achievable as a new past. We are no longer limited to thinking that what was. It is transformable just like the future is possible. Now we have something which is like a seventh dimension called history. And that history is not a record of something past. It's not that now you're history. It's that it is a vibrant higher dimension related to vision. And one of the best ways to think of this is that while consciousness is a field of differential consciousness, not integral, it's complementary to the integral symbolic mind. But the field of differential consciousness has a quality of being lasered, and those laser qualities are the possibilities of history, but because all of those possibilities are related together, they swirl in a kaleidoscopic consciousness until they are refined enough to be selected. And one matures enough as a prismatic person to work with other prismatic persons to come together in a differentially conscious community where one is not hunting animals to survive or hunting plants to live. One is not hunting for the right integrals, the right myths, the right psychology. One is now hunting together for the future and the new past to make it possible to follow history and keep its continuity, so that history becomes capable of time forms that endure for quite some time. And we've seen in the work that's been presented here and other places for quite some while, we are undergoing and have achieved a new refinement of species. That after 50,000 years as Homo sapiens sapiens, man wise about being wise, we are expanding to the entire star system. That this star system, humanity, is not just a collection of talented people for future experiments, but also is the recutting of the past in new ways that were never seen before. So that there's not only a new world coming in the future, there's a new world of the past, and that the present moment has transformed into a presence which is shareable, and that Homo sapiens stellaris, star wisdom mankind, is able to have a new kind of expansion affinity. Because as a stellar civilization, we are able to interface across the interstellar frontier with other star system civilizations on a par, but not quite a par, because it's evident now from the new past that's been characterized in many ways here from my work for the last almost half a century. We have a very special quality that is rare among star system civilizations. We have an ability that is not usually looked at as being exceptional until one reviews all the reports of so-called aliens. They do not have a sense of humor. They do not have that self-reflective quality of getting a sense of joy or a sense of laconic quality, nor do they have the complement to that, which is the ability to survive tragedy. Because comedy and tragedy are always paired together. It's like the origins of theater, the comic mask and the tragic mask. But as soon as you have that symmetry of the ability to have humor and the ability to survive tragedy, a third quality comes into play in reality, and that third quality is mystery. We have the capacity to not only have humor and to survive tragedy, but to engender mystery. And our kind has a high mysterious, not destiny, but talent. And it is this ability to be mysterious that draws other star system civilizations to be curious about how this happens, how we do this. And in our past, we have been blessed because we've had mysterious teachers for a very long time on a planet whose name is not Earth, but whose better name is something like Terra. What are my credentials to present this? The very first time I appeared in print was in this science fiction magazine, May of 1957. It was a letter, and it was one of two letters. And the letter before mine was by Isaac Asimov. This was 43 and 9 is 52 years ago. To the editor, how do you do? I'm Roger Weir. In my opinion, sir, Science Fiction Stories has become an example of what a science fiction magazine can, with a good editor at the helm, bring itself up to. And I go on from there. I wrote that letter at 16. The quality of being born into an insight has been with me since I was, before I could walk. And I carry on my right hand a scar where a pencil went through my hand as a baby boy crawling up some stairs in a house my parents owned, and fell on the pencil when it went through my hand. And immediately there was a quality of deep insight available as a little child, and I have a clear color, technicolor memory of being picked up, crying, taken upstairs. The little bedroom had dark green walls. It was 1941 in the early summer. I was taken to a doctor, and because it was the beginning of World War II, the doctor was a woman who had white hair that was bluish tinted and little rimless glasses, and her instruments were in a ultraviolet steel case, and I could see her nameplate, Dr. Longstreet, which at about 7 months I was able to read. This kind of equality brings out eventually in the human being, men and women alike, who go through these flashes of awakening, a sensibility towards looking through the world in such a way that one is able to see it more and more transparently. And one of the qualities we're going to be looking at in this presentation of 13 is what I call the philosophy of transparent symbols. Symbols that are opaque may be interpreted in several different ways, usually arranging themselves pro and con in some kind of a symmetry. One can look at that symmetry with a sense of humor, or one can endure the consequences of a humorless symmetry that becomes a conflict, that becomes loggerheads, and becomes tragic. But there is that third way that eventually comes into play, that of mystery, where instead of having comedies or tragedies, one has a third kind of dramatic exchange, and in ancient times that was called mystery. In the Renaissance, when the mysterious was put through superior prismatic refinements of men and women, those mystery plays became history plays. And when you look at a Renaissance equal of Aeschylus or Sophocles or Aristophanes, like Shakespeare, his plays range themselves into three sets: the comedies, the tragedies, and the histories. So that history is a refinement of mystery. And because of it being a refinement of mystery, we can teach ourselves and teach each other to refine from the mystery of the field of consciousness to the historical possibilities of our prismatic persons working in a new kind of community. Shakespeare is like a harbinger, is like a beacon. That it wasn't just the intellectual few. In fact, it had nothing to do with intellectual few. It wasn't just the wealthy few. It had nothing to do with the wealthy few. Shakespeare's plays were put on for everyday people all the time. They were held in high regard by the people who came, the men and women, and crowded together in their early theaters. And when they became increasingly self-conscious of what it was that they were really achieving, they moved their theater across the Thames River to the other side, to the bank side, and built a new theater and called it the Globe. This is a theater of the whole world. The whole world's a stage. And it was theater in the round in the sense that the audience in several tiers were able to not only look at the action on the stage, but look at each other watching the action on the stage, and that those who couldn't afford the seats could at least afford for just a few pence to stand in the middle. And so you had the beginnings of a transformation of what was a stadium for gladiatorial contests into a theater that was to reveal the mystery behind the history, the mystery behind the comedies, the mystery behind the tragedies. And it was shareable by men and women from all walks of life equally. This quality in Shakespeare led within less than a lifetime to the beginnings of Homo sapiens stellaris, which happened later in the 1600s, in the 17th century. And for the first time, you have a new characterization in Sir Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica, the principles of mathematics that applied everywhere in the universe. They were not limited to any kingdom or other. They were not even limited to the globe, to this world, or to any of the movable planets. Not limited to astrology, not limited to whatever astronomy was there of the day, but were unlimited because the universe, wherever it is, will have these qualities operating within its integral of nature, but also the abilities to see into increasingly and transform it by the ecology of consciousness. And one of the first persons to be able to understand in an everyday mystery into history from Newton's world was Benjamin Franklin. He did not write books of philosophy. He published a newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette. He published every year an almanac, so that the average man and woman had access to like a two-step quality of going deeper into the mystery in a humorous way. Ben Franklin's humor is famous, the wit and wisdom of Franklin. But also at the same time, to be able to endure through the various tragedies of colonial hardships, the wars, the poverty, the incredible ability to keep surviving. I once did a survey of all of the voyages to America, to what became the United States, from the first companies in the 1580s through to about the 1680s when Newton published his work. In that 100 years, 90% of all the immigrants died within a couple of years. Only about 10% were able to survive. One of the qualities that we still hold dear here is Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving was the first time that the colonists learned to listen to the Native Americans who had lived here for tens of thousands of years and showed them, you have to plant these kinds of foods which will keep through the winter so you will not starve. This is why we grow corn and pumpkins and squashes and cranberries, so that we can take the meats, pound the berries in, make a preserve for them. We can store these vegetables, and you will be able to survive the New England weather. And so Thanksgiving is the beginning of understanding that you have to acclimate yourself to the landscape by those who live there and have lived there successfully. Which is why our population now needs to acclimate ourselves to those men and women who have survived this world as Homo sapiens stellaris pioneers for several thousands of years, and especially over the last 300 years, have begun to expand the number in their communities, so it's no longer little wisdom groups of 50 or less, or a couple of hundreds, rarely more, but that the population became expansive, so that one of the visions that Thomas Jefferson had, he was riding on a horse with his oldest daughter. His father was a land surveyor, so he knew the Virginia landscape like the back of his hand, literally. And he owned a plot of land that had a big natural bridge, about 200-foot high rock natural bridge. And he was riding with his daughter on top of this bridge. And he had a vision of tens and hundreds of thousands of men and women, almost like visionary beings, passing overhead and passing west. And he realized, we're in a great experiment. What if we have a wisdom community of millions of men and women and provide them with the natural integral that they can grow up and master this world, but also what we call today the ecology of consciousness, to be able to be those kinds of prismatic persons who not only get along together and live together, but who creatively and memorably make the future and the new past together. Now we are poised on a planet where we can have billions and we can do anything. And there are no aliens. Those who have the sense of humor like us will find brethren. Those who have the ability to endure tragedy will find us stalwart together. And those very few, and they're extremely rare, who are able to appreciate mystery will sing with us those choirs and those songs of praise. Thank you for the gift of reality. Let's take a break. I brought this hand. In 1970, I left San Francisco to go to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, to design a 16-course interdisciplinary series. Alberta had so much oil that they became known as the White Sheikhs. And they gave checks back to all the people in the province. And then they had so much money left over that they decided to build new hospitals and new schools. And in Calgary, because it was the oil center of Canada, they had 400 home offices of oil companies there. They built a new kind of a university. It was a spaceship building of 15 acres, and it was built just like a very huge mothership flying saucer, with no interior walls, which is one of the reasons they liked me, because in San Francisco, my program was the spearhead of the College Without Walls. My career there began spectacularly after being a very average undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin. Only I had average grades because I never went to the classes that I was supposed to. I went to the classes that I liked because I was working. I was cooking in an Italian restaurant to get through, and I thought, as long as I'm working to pay for it, I'll take the courses I want. So when I passed the graduate record exam high enough, they not only took me to graduate school, but they gave me the prize teaching assistantship, which meant they not only paid me to go to school, but they let me design courses. And so I began designing courses and offering them in 1965. So I was hired to go to Calgary to design a program. And all of the courses that I offered were extraordinarily popular. And one time, my symbols course, I forgot to put the limit on the registration. And when it got to 350 some students, they phoned me and they said, we can't do this because there's a law in Canada. After 70 students, every 13 students, you have to have a teaching assistant. So we're going to have to hire almost a couple dozen teaching assistants. So I had not only all those students, but I had the teaching assistants because they didn't know how to deal with kinds of educational things I was designing. So I had almost 400 people. Fortunately, I had a huge budget. In 1970, when I started, my budget was $90,000 a year, which was a lot of money then, just to spend on travel and on professional societies and things. Instead, I spent it all on the students. And I made colored pamphlets, like pamphlets I still make, for not only every student, but anybody who wanted one. And we used to have runs of several thousand because everyone wanted them. And not only that, I did posters, big, huge 3-foot by 2-foot posters with metallic paint screenings. And so everybody was putting up these decorations and reading these interesting homemade books. And all of the books that I assigned always had recommendations of maybe 5 or 6 for each one of those. And eventually, the bookstore manager turned over half the bookstore to me, so I just ordered everything that I wanted to see out, and it became the most famous bookstore in Canada. It was packed all the time with people, especially other professors, who always said, we have trouble getting our students to read a textbook. You have people reading all the time, everything. Not only that, but their parents are reading. They're in here buying books. Their friends are in here. How do you do it? I said, why don't you stick around and see for yourself? One of my best friends there was from Australia. He was the journalism professor. And his favorite authors were Ernest Hemingway and Aldous Huxley. And he said, well, you're the perfect meshing of Hemingway and Huxley together. You're not only talking about stuff that is psychedelically interesting, but you have the courage to keep doing it even though you've hooked maybe the bigger fish than you thought. When a transformation happens from the mind to the field of consciousness, the only way the transform can actually take place is that the previous symbolic form must be full. You cannot transform until the media is saturated, and when it's saturated, then you can transform it. If you're dissolving salt in warm water, it'll keep dissolving until the water is saturated with dissolved salt, and then you put one more little pinch in, and it all precipitates out. It's the principle not only of alchemy, but of chemistry. Our planetary humanity needs every kind of human being that there is. We cannot saturate or transform until everyone is included and participant. Because whatever has developed out of the species of Homo sapiens sapiens, Homo sapiens stellarius will only be stable as a refined species when everyone on the planet participates in the community. No one is insignificant. And so the precursor to a stellar star system-wide civilization is a planetary culture, not a global culture. That was a Renaissance idea and became an ideal commandeered by various empires ever since. And empires of all kinds, including corporations. It is not a global economy, it is a planetary sculpture, and every kind of man and woman is needed to saturate the whole so that the transform will take and be stable. You can, as an individual, transform yourself. You can, as small communities, transform together. But the only way that the planet transforms into a stellar civilization is that every kind of man and woman needs to be not just included, but dynamically participant. We're looking at the way in which a historical development some 300 years ago was the trigger for the beginnings of the intensification of a new refinement of species. The quality of that refinement of species turns out to have a time cycle. And its time cycle is a 2,000-year time cycle that also has a fulcrum in the middle, so that every millennium is a part of that time cycle's energy wave. And if you go back 300 years from today to the time of Benjamin Franklin and Sir Isaac Newton, and then go back 2,000 years from them, you get the time of Alexander the Great. And if you go back 2,000 years from him, you get Sargon of Akkad in what is today Iraq, making the first international civilization on the planet. It spread from the Aegean to the Indus River, from Cyprus to the Hindu Kush, from what is today Kashmir, all the way almost to where Crete is in the Mediterranean, 4,400 years ago. That every kind of person along that enormous complexity of trade routes required a second language, a common denominator language that they were able to share together, and a pictographic code so that business could be done. And the beginnings then of a written language were developed out of the early pictographic business qualities, where if you had a cattle to sell, there were little diagrams that meant cattle, or if it were goats or sheep or grain or whatever it was. And all of this had to be kept together. And the way that it was kept together is by the hand. Again, the universal symbol of the hand, sealing the deal. Only the deal was sealed because you had a little clay pouch that you could put each one of these little clay cattle or goats or sheep or whatever it was inside that pouch, and then you would seal it and give it over. That was your bill of sale. They had the goods, you had that bill of sale, and you could exchange that bill of sale then for other goods. And eventually they took to making the pictographs not as little things that went into the pouch, but that they used the palm-size clay tablet and inscribed them on the outside, and that was the beginning of a written language, written symbolic language. But when they had the common denominator in the time of Sargon of Akkad, the written language had to be improved so that as a second language anywhere in that whole swath of the world, and the center of that swath of the world was called the Fertile Crescent. It went from where Basra is today, arced up as a crescent, and came down to the Mediterranean, where the big early city was called Ugarit, on the border of Lebanon and Syria today. And that Fertile Crescent was the way in which the pivot of that whole civilization extended into the Mediterranean and extended down the Persian Gulf and along the coast of what is today Iran and Pakistan, all the way into what is today India. And that entire range became the first time where there was a common language, a common way of understanding that business must be transferable. And so the monetary and the language, the economics of it, but also those people who ran those enormous trade routes that would take sometimes years to go over, they discovered that there were areas that were specially valuable for certain things. One of the biggest, rarest commodities in that world was tin. And there was a mountain in Iran that had tin. There was a mountain in what is today northern Spain, just north of Portugal. There was a mountain in the west of England, and these were some of the few sources. And so tin became one of the little bakshish things that all these long ship or overland caravans that you would always tip to make sure not only is the deal sealed, but that when you come back next time, they'll be ready for you. They will have done their part of the deal by getting their stuff, and you will have done your part by bringing your stuff. We're in a place where the planetary culture, we need everyone's prismatic stuff in order to bring the saturation complete. It is not like we're out of time, it's that we're in the recognition that that's the only way it's going to work. The only way there's going to be a future and a new past is that all of us as a planetary culture transform together. When we do, that stellar civilization will already have its fertile crescent, will already have its base out of which the resonance of it. And this is where we come in to why there are 13 presentations. A presentation is not a lecture. It is a dramatic interchange where I am using my differential conscious vision to exchange with your symbolic thought structure so that your imagination will come into play in the event going on here. And my remembering will go into play as a memory for you. And that exchanging in this way gives us the ability then to put that quintessential fifth dimension of consciousness into space-time. And to bring a sixth dimensional prismatic quality of person into play creatively. So that we refine together in this sharing, in this exchanging, in this interpenetration, our ability to refine our prismatic quality in less time, in wider space. We're at the cusp now where it's not a global economy, it is a planetary culture about to become a star-wide civilization. There are such publications as Icarus. This is the October 2008 issue. The International Journal of Star System Studies. It's been in business now for almost 30-some years, 40 years. It used to be a very small publication, now every month on sophisticated, long-lasting paper. This paper will last at least 500 years. And there is such a thing as the Planetary Report, the Planetary Society, founded by Carl Sagan in Pasadena, just outside of Caltech. He was from Cornell University and was visiting Caltech when they were setting up JPL, and he said, what we need is a population of people all over the planet who dream together. And so the Planetary Society was founded. Over 110 years ago, Nature was founded as a publication in London, and now it's read all over the world. Millions of people read it every week. It's 200 or 300 pages every week. It is the international forum for a planetary culture already reaching out, like with Icarus and the Planetary Report, that we are already mature to do this. What is keeping us back is we do not have the saturation of humanity, which we need, and we need it now. It's not about conquest. It's not about wars. It's not about economics. It is about the transform of our species. It is about a new civilization. It is about a planet. When the whole Earth catalog first came out in San Francisco, there was that special photograph of the entire Earth from space. And the caption was, "We can't put it together, it is together." It is a planet. When you go far enough out from Earth, Earth becomes a star. It becomes a aquamarine, deep aquamarine star. When Voyager 2 left the orbit of Neptune in 1989 and trained its cameras back, it took the first family portrait of all the planets in the sun together. Pluto was within the orbit of Neptune, and so you had in one photo the entire star system. And as soon as that entire star system was taken as a saturation, we began discovering that there's more to the star system than we had thought. That beyond Neptune, beyond Pluto, is a whole new quality of our star system. Now it is called the Kuiper Belt. And that Pluto and its moon Charon and its two little moons, Nix and Hydra, are not the farthest out planet, but they're exemplars of the objects in the Kuiper Belt, and there might be several 100,000 of them. And some of them are much larger than Pluto. So that we have 4 inner planets that are small and rocky, and then an asteroid belt. Then we have 4 big giant gas planets and a much bigger asteroid belt. So that the star system has a double wave, 4 and then a 5th, 4 and then a 5th. And then surrounding the entirety of that, almost 1 light year out, is the Oort cloud of billions of smaller planetesimals. If we are able to bring ourselves to understand and appreciate every single person we meet is indispensable to the planetary culture, to the stellar civilization. We can do this as soon as we do this. It's all that is holding us back. We have the technology, we have the art, we have the vision, we have the symbolic structure of thought. We have myths literally without end. We have the rituals refined down and the existential so that you can print the name of your company atom by atom if you want. The only thing holding us back is being together and getting the saturation complete. That's it. And so this presentation series is meant to be a series of 13 resonances that make a harmonic set. And that harmonic set can be shared anywhere, not just in the world, but anywhere in the worlds. Because there are star systems without number who are interested in us. Because we have been gifted, as we said this morning, with a sense of humor, which is rare, with a sense of enduring tragedy, which is just as rare, but with a third appreciation for mystery, which is 3 times as rare. The classic registry, 500 BC, in the sutras of the Buddha, when he would be teaching, they said that beings from all over the tricosm were there to listen to him. That it was amazing. When Jesus taught, he taught in such a way that increasingly It was for the transformation of mankind. Muhammad has the ability to deliver the pace of the patience of mercy that allows for the sharing to be distributed equally. All men are brothers. No one is left out. And many other heritages all forming together a kind of a matrix of solution. And what comes out is not peace, but reality. What occurs in that transform, that first transform, is that we have a shareable presence in vision. And then the second transform, we have a swirling kaleidoscope of historical possibilities that we are able to explore individually, in groups, together. I spent 42 years refining the Learning Civilization program. It's now, the outline is about 100 pages. It is 104 90-minute, 80-minute presentations that cycle themselves together in an octave. An 8-part, 4 for the cycle of integral, 4 for the ecology of consciousness, that come together and dovetail and allow for the ability to have that asteroid belt and that Kuiper belt come into play in freedom in such a way that the full hands as a pair is the most ancient way in which our kind used to praise. The original prayer is not to ask for, but to accept in appreciation. And it was this movement to the side that was called the orans. And when it was brought together, then it is like a gasho. The teaching mode in that has always been the hand since Paleolithic times. This particular hand was given to me by my students in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada, after 5 years. It is the door handle of a Vietnamese monastery outside of Saigon, not far from Bien Hoa Air Base, which was destroyed by napalm bombs. And one of the few things left from it was this hand, this door handle. This hand is in the teaching mudra. If the hand is straight up, the hand is one of greeting, that there's fearlessness between all of us. If the middle finger is slightly forward, it is that we can meet. I can guide in this way, and you can guide in your way. And that shared guidance is the learning that takes place. It's not an inculcation from one to the other. It's an interchange, an exchange from each to each, all in all. This quality of appreciation allows for the original transform to a saturated differential conscious vision field to go into this kaleidoscopic flow set form, which is really a spiritual history, so that one begins to understand again and again the cycles of integral nature interpenetrate with the ecologies of conscious exploration. And we have an ability now to bring ourselves into a deep appreciation and a very high aspiration. In 1994, the Oxford publications, Oxford University, put together 2 of the most advanced science groups on the planet. One is JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab. The other is the APL, the Applied Physics Lab. JPL is in Pasadena here, adjunct to Caltech. APL is in Baltimore, adjunct to Johns Hopkins University. Fundamentals of Space Systems. Almost 800 pages already by 1994 of highly technical details of how you make space systems work. By 1999, this was published in Berlin, Springer Verlag, in English, Space Stations. The ability to envision and to technically detail and carry out every single item of what is needed to live there. And is not only called the International Space Station, but hopefully will be called the Planetary Space Station. And it is this ability to take a look at every detail. Chapter 10 is called Synergisms. During the past few years, synergism has become a frequently used expression. Terms such as synergistic effects, synergetics, and integrated thought have become catchphrases, especially in discussions on political, social, or ecological issues. The attempt to use a more or less comprehensive approach is quite common in each of these areas. In order to find an optimum criteria-specific overall solution of a design problem by combining different partial solutions. A solution is where the existentiality is dissolved in the medium, where the existential bodies, where the existential ritual actions are dissolved in the mythic horizon of our experience, where they may be precipitated out in a new integral symbol thought way that is transparent so that it is a matter of supernaturality to go through what was before the defining walls of the mind through a transparency where those defining walls are so many open gates that the mind now is called an open mind. Between 1939 and 1941 was a crucial wedge of space-time, and three different men on the vanguard of understanding the structure of the atom, the unbelievable discovery that atomic power was not only within reach, but within reach then. Not as science fiction, but that just waiting there for it to be done. Each of the three wrote a book called The Open Mind. One of them was the great mathematician of the day who developed and discovered group theory in the 1920s, Hermann Weyl, W-E-Y-L. The other was the Danish physicist Niels Bohr. And the third was the American Robert Oppenheimer. All of them recognized it is the open mind that brings our historical creative making into sync so that we can interface with the cosmos as it really is. And that when we do, the cosmos is no longer a universe, not even a multiverse. It is a cosmos and responds to us with recognition, knows who we are, calls us by name, that we can in turn make that cinch by name to name. Not only blood of my blood, but spirit of my spirit. Not only made in likeness, but made in living lifeness. We have all of this available to us. This was the dedication page. This paragraph was written in 1970 in Calgary, Alberta. In this humanities program, the idea is to fill the gaps and interrelational spaces that have naturally developed in the contemporary world as a residual of increasing specialization. This specialization has taken the predominant form of well-defined subjects and accurately delineated processes. The universal application of the scientific method to entities and logical analysis to procedure has benefited everyone by presenting reasonably clear pictures of the world. In this act of focusing, however, the background has been eliminated. The interconnecting tissue of things and their movement and relationality has disappeared. Not from reality as is so ignorantly lamented, but merely from man's microscope perspective. This humanities program restores consciousness of all backgrounds and the requisites of human character commensurate with that restoration. This was written 36 years later in 2006. It's entitled Our New Learning. Over the millennia, many errors and misconceptions, deceptions, and ideological doctrines have accrued and now not only distort but deny our opportunities for maturity. This cannot continue. We need a new form for learning, one commensurate with all that really founds our planetary humanity and stellar potentials. One able to comb through the snarls, even washed and rinsed, so that we may emerge resplendent, vibrant in our own unique, refined persons, and find interesting possibilities of sharing a community everywhere we wish to explore. This is a new form for an ancient double cycle, a triple transform of maturation, west and east from the Paleolithic to the interstellar. Here is presented in a special poetic syntax of delivery, a new education. This takes its winding course time to find ways to unheard of oceans. Before you is a learning style in forms and fields that recreates our treasured past, often cut now into new jewels, and envisions promising possible futures as well. Futures and our new past in complementarity. We do belong in the real cosmos, spread invitingly vast before our shared presence. More next week.